The morning of September 12, 2024, started like any other day at Yellowstone National Park. The maintenance crew arrived at the Upper Geyser Basin at 6:30 a.m., preparing for another day of routine inspections. But what they discovered that morning would finally solve a mystery that had haunted the park for 32 years. The unprecedented drought of 2024 had caused water levels in the thermal pools to drop to historic lows, revealing secrets that nature had kept hidden since 1992. Park Supervisor Janet Morrison was the first to notice something unusual. The Morning Glory Pool, usually a vibrant blue circle of superheated water, had receded nearly 15 feet from its normal edge. Where water once bubbled at over 160 degrees Fahrenheit, now lay exposed mineral deposits, colored in brilliant oranges and yellows. Among these ancient formations, something metallic caught the morning sun. It was a watch, a Rolex Submariner, its hands frozen at 2:52 p.m. The discovery would have been cataloged as just another piece of tourist debris, except for one detail. The serial number on the watch matched one reported missing in July 1992, along with its owner, Anthony Marino, and 3 other members of an ill-fated photography expedition. For 32 years, their disappearance near Old Faithful had remained one of Yellowstone's most troubling unsolved mysteries. Dorothy Winters had been 42 years old when she vanished that summer day in 1992. A pioneering travel blogger before the term even existed, she had built a reputation documenting America's hidden wonders through her newsletter, Off the Beaten Path. Her daughter Sarah was only 17 when her mother disappeared. Now 49 herself, Sarah had never stopped searching for answers. "My mother was meticulous," Sarah would later tell investigators. "She planned every detail of every trip. The idea that she just wandered off and had an accident never made sense to me." The expedition had been Dorothy's most ambitious project yet. She had assembled a team to document Yellowstone's thermal features for what she hoped would become a groundbreaking book. Richard O'Connor, 38, was her photography partner, known for his ability to capture the raw beauty of nature. Helen Frost, 35, served as their geological consultant, a respected scientist who had published several papers on Yellowstone's unique thermal ecosystem. Anthony Marino, 44, had funded the expedition. A wealthy investor from Chicago, he had made his fortune in real estate during the 1980s boom, and had recently developed a passion for conservation photography. The morning of July 15, 1992, had started with promise. The group had checked out of Canyon Lodge at 6:01 a.m. sharp, their white Ford van loaded with camera equipment, geological instruments, and enough supplies for a full day of documentation. The hotel registry showed Dorothy's characteristic precise handwriting, noting their expected return time as 6:00 p.m. The desk clerk remembered them well, even after all these years. "They were excited," he recalled. "Ms. Winters kept talking about the perfect morning light for photography." At the wheel of the van was Theodore Cross, though everyone called him Teddy. Just 22 years old at the time, now 54, Teddy had been hired just 3 days before the trip. Dorothy had found him through a posting at the local community college, where he was taking photography classes. He had seemed eager, even desperate, for the work. $20 an hour just to drive and help with equipment, he had told his roommate. "It's the easiest money I'll ever make." The first sign that something was wrong came at 8:30 that evening. Kevin Rivers, then a 24-year-old park ranger, was finishing his patrol route when he discovered Teddy Cross near the Morning Glory Pool. The young man was in severe distress, his clothes soaked through, exhibiting signs of shock and hypothermia despite the warm July evening. His left jacket sleeve was torn, and he kept repeating the same words. "They're gone, all of them. The ground just gave way." Rivers immediately called for backup and medical assistance. In his official report, filed that night and now yellowed with age, he wrote, "Subject appeared to be in genuine psychological distress, unable to provide coherent account of incident. kept mentioning thermal activity and unstable ground. No sign of other party members in immediate area. The search began immediately. Park rangers, aided by local law enforcement, combed the thermal areas throughout the night. The van was found parked at an unusual location, nearly a mile from any designated tourist area, near a restricted zone that required special permits. The positioning seemed strange, as the morning's plan had been to photograph Old Faithful from the established viewing areas. Luna Blackwood, 26 at the time and working as a tour coordinator for the park, had been the one to issue their permits. Everything was in order, she had insisted to investigators. They had authorization for the standard photography zones, nothing more. Yet questions arose almost immediately about the permits. The signature appeared rushed, unlike Dorothy's usual careful penmanship, and the coordinates listed didn't match the approved areas. The initial investigation focused heavily on the possibility of a tragic accident. Yellowstone's thermal features were notoriously dangerous. The ground around hot springs could be thin and unstable, and the superheated water beneath could reach temperatures over 200 degrees Fahrenheit. Every year, despite numerous warnings, tourists ventured off designated boardwalks and trails. But 4 experienced adults, including a geologist who understood these dangers, all having an accident at the same time, seemed statistically improbable. Teddy's account, when he finally became coherent enough to speak 2 days later, was frustratingly vague. He claimed the group had decided to explore an area slightly off the main trail to get unique photographs. According to him, they had been walking in single file when the ground suddenly collapsed beneath them. He said he had been at the back of the group, photographing them from behind, when it happened. He managed to grab onto solid ground, but the others had fallen into a thermal pool. The trauma, he insisted, had caused him to black out. He couldn't remember how he got to where Rivers found him. The search continued for 2 weeks. Dogs couldn't work effectively near the thermal features due to the sulfur and heat. Helicopters flew grid patterns over the park. Divers, wearing special protective equipment, searched the deeper thermal pools. But no trace of Dorothy Winters, Richard O'Connor, Helen Frost, or Anthony Marino was ever found. The case was eventually classified as a tragic accident, though doubts persisted. 3 days before the incident, tensions had been building within the group. Other guests at Canyon Lodge reported hearing raised voices from the conference room the group had booked for planning. Anthony Marino, in particular, seemed agitated. He kept going on about exclusive access, one guest remembered. He was saying his money should buy them privileges other tourists didn't get. Dorothy had apparently pushed back, insisting they follow all park rules. The argument had lasted over an hour. That same evening, July 12th, Dorothy had called her daughter from the hotel lobby payphone. Sarah, 17 at the time, remembered the conversation clearly, even 3 decades later. Mom sounded stressed, which was unusual for her. She mentioned that the investor, Mr. Marino, was being difficult. She said he wanted to go places that weren't safe, that he didn't understand you couldn't just buy your way into restricted areas of a national park. Richard O'Connor's wife, Patricia, had also noticed something amiss. Richard had called her the night before the disappearance, mentioning that their young assistant seemed oddly knowledgeable about the park's restricted areas. Richard said the kid kept suggesting these out-of-the-way spots, places that weren't on any tourist map. He found it strange that a college student from Montana would know so much about hidden thermal features. The morning of July 15th had proceeded according to schedule, at least initially. A German tourist couple had photographed the group at 11:15 a.m. near the Grand Prismatic Spring. In the background of their vacation photo, barely visible but later enhanced by investigators, the 5 figures could be seen. Dorothy was pointing at something while consulting a map. Richard had his camera raised. Helen was taking notes. Anthony stood apart with his arms crossed, and Teddy was by the van, apparently loading or unloading equipment. At 2:00 p.m., a park maintenance crew spotted the white van parked in an unusual location well off the standard tourist route. They made a note to check if the vehicle had proper permits, but didn't investigate immediately. It was summer, the park's busiest season, and illegally parked vehicles were a constant issue. They planned to circle back later if the van was still there. The last confirmed sighting of the group came at 2:47 p.m. Another tourist's photograph, taken of Old Faithful erupting, captured 5 figures in the far distance, walking along what appeared to be an unmarked trail. The image was grainy, but the bright red jacket Dorothy always wore was clearly visible. They were heading toward an area known to park rangers as the Artemisia sector, a region of particularly volatile thermal activity that was strictly off-limits to tourists. Among Teddy's possessions, recovered from his soaked clothing, investigators found several items that seemed routine at the time: his wallet, containing his driver's license, and $43 in cash; a Swiss Army knife, common equipment for outdoor work; a pager, the display cracked and waterlogged, which investigators dismissed as destroyed by the thermal water; and oddly, a receipt from the Old Faithful gift shop, time-stamped at 3:45 p.m., showing the purchase of a postcard and a bottle of water. The receipt would prove to be the first crack in Teddy's story, though its significance wouldn't be understood for 32 years. The investigation that followed in 1992 had been thorough by the standards of the time, but technology and investigative techniques have advanced considerably in 3 decades. When the watch was discovered in September 2024, it triggered a complete review of the cold case. Detective Michelle Sterling, brought in from the Montana State Police Cold Case Unit, approached the investigation with fresh eyes and modern methods. The first priority was establishing a precise timeline. Sterling's team began by digitizing all the original evidence, including photographs, witness statements, and physical evidence reports. The German tourist's photograph from 11:15 a.m. was subjected to advanced enhancement techniques unavailable in 1992. The results were revealing. While Dorothy, Richard, Helen, and Anthony were clearly engaged with their work, Teddy stood apart, not helping with equipment as might be expected, but apparently engaged in an animated conversation on his pager. Pagers in 1992 could only receive messages, not send them, Sterling explained to her team. So whoever Teddy was communicating with had to be calling from a phone, leaving numeric codes or brief messages through a paging service. The pager found in Teddy's possession had been dismissed as water-damaged beyond recovery, but Sterling wasn't satisfied. She sent it to a specialized electronic forensics lab in Denver. Meanwhile, the receipt from the gift shop presented an obvious contradiction. If Teddy had been traumatized by witnessing his companions fall into a thermal pool at approximately 2:52 p.m., as indicated by Anthony's stopped watch, how had he been composed enough to make purchases at 3:45 p.m.? When confronted with this discrepancy in a new interview, Teddy, now 54 and working as a carpenter in Billings, Montana, claimed he didn't remember buying anything. "I was in shock," he insisted. "I must have wandered around for hours. Buying something from a gift shop, it must have been like a reflex, trying to act normal." The investigation then turned to Kevin Rivers, the ranger who had discovered Teddy. Now 56 and retired from the Park Service, Rivers lived in Idaho, where he ran a wilderness guide company. His memory of that night remained crystal clear. "Something always bothered me about that scene," he admitted. "The kid's clothes were soaked, sure, but the pattern was wrong. If he'd been pulling people from a pool or had fallen partially in himself, the watermarks would have been different. It looked more like he deliberately soaked himself, maybe stood under one of the runoff streams." Rivers' patrol logs from that day were re-examined with particular attention to timing. His official route should have had him in the Upper Geyser Basin area around 4 p.m., but he had logged a deviation to investigate reported bear activity in a different sector. This meant he wasn't anywhere near the area where the group disappeared during the crucial window. Yet Teddy had been found specifically along River's usual evening route, as if someone knew exactly where and when the ranger would be passing. Luna Blackwood, now 58 and serving as Yellowstone's deputy superintendent, became defensive when questioned about the permits. The signature inconsistencies on the documents had never been properly explained. Under pressure, she revealed something she had kept hidden for 32 years. Anthony Marino had approached me privately the day before, she admitted. He offered me $5,000 cash to approve an extended permit, one that would allow them into restricted areas. I refused, of course, but the next morning, when I checked the files, someone had altered their existing permit. Suspicion immediately fell on Luna. Financial records from 1992 were subpoenaed, and investigators discovered that she had indeed received a substantial deposit of $50,000 into her account the day after the disappearance. But Luna had an explanation. "My father died that week," she said. "The deposit was his life insurance payout. I have all the documentation." The insurance records confirmed her story, and further investigation revealed that Luna had actually been in Jackson Hole at a Park Service conference on July 15th, with dozens of witnesses placing her there during the time of the incident. Attention shifted back to the altered permits. Handwriting analysis suggested that whoever had modified them was attempting to imitate Dorothy's precise penmanship, but had failed in subtle ways. The pressure patterns were wrong, indicating someone writing slowly and carefully rather than with Dorothy's natural flow. Security footage from park buildings in 1992 was minimal, but investigators found that the permit office had maintained a visitor log. On the morning of July 15th at 5:30 a.m., before the office officially opened, someone had signed in using illegible writing. The timestamp coincided with when the van would have entered the park. The forensics lab in Denver managed to recover partial data from Teddy's water-damaged pager. While most messages were irretrievable, they found fragments of the device's memory that indicated it had received at least 3 messages on July 15th. One partial number sequence was recovered. 215 clear. The timestamp, remarkably preserved in the device's firmware, was 3:15 p.m. This discovery prompted investigators to check payphone records from the park on that date. In 1992, cell phones were rare, and most communication in Yellowstone happened through payphones. Records showed that a payphone near the Old Faithful Visitor Center had been used to call a paging service at 3:14 p.m. on July 15th. The call lasted 47 seconds, just long enough to leave a message. Richard O'Connor's camera equipment, which had never been found, suddenly became a priority. His wife Patricia revealed that Richard always used a specific type of film canister, custom ordered from a specialty shop in Chicago. These canisters were made of aluminum instead of plastic, designed to protect film in extreme conditions. If any had survived in a thermal pool, they might still be recoverable. The search team returned to Morning Glory Pool with metal detectors specifically calibrated for aluminum. On the 3rd day of searching, they found what they were looking for. Embedded in mineral deposits was a film canister, its exterior etched by 32 years of thermal activity, but still intact. Inside, protected by the aluminum shell, was a roll of film. The film was sent to a specialized lab in Rochester, New York, where Kodak engineers attempted to develop it using experimental techniques designed for severely degraded film. Most frames were beyond recovery, but 3 images partially survived. The first showed the group walking along a boardwalk, all 5 figures visible and appearing in good spirits. The second was mostly destroyed, showing only fragments of sky and what might have been steam from a geyser. The third photograph changed everything. It showed Teddy Cross standing behind the group, but his expression was unlike anything captured in the earlier photos. His face showed not the enthusiasm of a young assistant grateful for work, but something else entirely. Concentration, calculation. And in his hand, partially visible at the edge of the frame, was what appeared to be Helen Frost's geological survey notebook. Helen's notebook had never been found, assumed lost with her in the thermal pool. Yet here was photographic evidence that Teddy had possessed it at some point. Investigators returned to Helen's published papers and discovered something significant. 2 months before the Yellowstone trip, she had published a paper on the instability of certain thermal features in the park. The paper included detailed maps of areas where the ground crust was thinnest, where thermal pools were hidden beneath seemingly solid ground, where a person who knew exactly where to step could navigate safely while others might break through. The investigation team decided to conduct an experiment. Using Helen's published data and park geological surveys, they mapped every location where someone with knowledge of underground thermal features could predict danger zones. One area stood out, a section near the Artemisia geyser complex, where 3 thermal pools lay beneath a thin mineral crust that would appear solid to casual observers. In 1992, this area was unmarked and unrestricted, though it would later be closed to public access in 1995 after several near accidents. Teddy's background was scrutinized more carefully. The story of being a photography student was true, but incomplete. Before enrolling in community college, Teddy had worked for 2 summers at a geological survey company in Montana. His job had been data entry, inputting geological reports into databases. Among the reports he would have processed were several studies of Yellowstone's thermal features, including preliminary versions of Helen Frost's research. Financial records from 1992 revealed more disturbing patterns. Teddy had been in serious financial trouble. He owed over $8,000 in gambling debts to some particularly unsavory characters in Billings. His enrollment in community college had been an attempt to defer loan payments, but creditors were closing in. 3 days before Dorothy hired him, his car had been repossessed. He needed money desperately. But the $20 an hour Dorothy was paying him wouldn't have solved his problems. Investigators discovered that Teddy had learned something crucial about Anthony Marino during the pre-trip planning. Marino had recently taken out a $2 million life insurance policy with his business as the beneficiary. More importantly, Marino had been bragging about carrying over $10,000 in cash for the trip, planning to make some under-the-table payments for exclusive access to restricted areas. The reconstruction of events began to take shape. Teddy had deliberately sought out the job with Dorothy's expedition after learning about it through his college connections. He had studied Helen's research, understanding exactly where the most dangerous thermal features were located. He had suggested route changes, presenting himself as helpfully knowledgeable about hidden photographic opportunities. And on July 15th, he had put his plan into action. The altered permits hadn't been changed by Luna or Dorothy, but by Teddy himself, using his early morning access to create a paper trail that would justify their presence in a dangerous area. He had led the group to a specific spot he knew from Helen's research, a place where the thermal crust was less than 6 inches thick above a superheated pool. While the others focused on photography, he had positioned them precisely where he needed them. But investigators needed more evidence. They returned to study the pattern of water damage on Teddy's clothing, which had been photographed but not properly analyzed in 1992. Modern forensic techniques revealed that the water patterns were consistent with someone standing under a thermal runoff for approximately 3 to 5 minutes, not with someone falling into or reaching into a thermal pool. The tears in his jacket, when examined under magnification, showed patterns consistent with deliberate cutting rather than accidental tearing. The investigation uncovered one more crucial piece of evidence. Park maintenance records showed that on July 14th, the day before the incident, someone had reported seeing a young man matching Teddy's description near the Artemisia complex, apparently taking photographs and making notes. When shown a photo lineup, the witness, now in his 80s but still sharp, identified Teddy without hesitation. "I remembered him because he wasn't dressed like a tourist," the man recalled. "He had on work boots and was carrying surveying equipment. I thought he was with the Park Service." The pager message, "clear," took on new meaning. Investigators theorized that Teddy had an accomplice, someone who was monitoring park ranger movements and could confirm when the area was free of witnesses. The timing of 3:15 p.m. coincided with the daily Old Faithful eruption window, when almost all tourists and staff would be drawn to the geyser, leaving other areas temporarily deserted. Financial forensics revealed the final piece of the puzzle. In August 1992, just 3 weeks after the incident, Teddy's gambling debts had been mysteriously paid in full. The payment had come through a complex series of money orders and cash deposits, carefully structured to avoid reporting requirements. The total amount was exactly $10,347, remarkably close to what Anthony Marino had been carrying. When presented with this accumulated evidence, Teddy's story began to change. He claimed that if money had been found and debts paid, it must have been because he had discovered Marino's money bag after the accident and taken it in his panic. They were already gone, he insisted. Taking the money didn't hurt anyone. I was young and desperate. But this new version of events still didn't explain the altered permits, the pre-scouting of the location, or the pager messages. The investigation team decided to employ a new strategy. They told Teddy, truthfully, that they were planning to conduct a ground-penetrating radar survey of the Artemisia complex area, using technology that could potentially locate remains even in thermal pools. They suggested that if there was anything he wanted to reveal before such a discovery, now would be the time. The radar survey was scheduled for October 15, 2024, exactly 3 months after the watch had been discovered. Teddy's attorney, sensing the walls closing in, advised his client to consider a plea arrangement. But Teddy maintained his innocence, insisting that whatever happened that day had been a tragic accident. He admitted to taking the money, but nothing more. Detective Sterling decided to approach the case from a different angle. She focused on the one person who had supposedly been helping the investigation all along, Teddy himself. For 32 years, he had presented himself as the traumatized survivor, the lucky one who had escaped a horrible fate. He had even attended memorial services for the victims, comforting their families, sharing his survivor's guilt with Dorothy's daughter Sarah. He was always so helpful, Sarah recalled, her voice tight with newfound anger. Every anniversary, he would call to check on me. He even helped organize a memorial plaque in the park in 2002. Looking back now, it seems like he was keeping tabs on whether anyone suspected anything. The ground-penetrating radar survey began at dawn on October 15th. The equipment, far more sophisticated than anything available in the 1990s, could detect density variations up to 50 feet below the surface. The team worked in a grid pattern, methodically covering the area identified in Helen Frost's research as having the thinnest thermal crust. By noon, they had found something significant. Approximately 30 feet below the current surface, in what would have been a thermal pool in 1992, the radar detected 4 distinct metallic signatures. The patterns were consistent with belt buckles, zippers, and other clothing hardware, positioned in a way that suggested 4 separate individuals. The thermal activity over 32 years had essentially cremated any organic material, but metal and synthetic materials had survived, trapped in mineral deposits. When informed of the discovery, Teddy's composure finally cracked. But his reaction wasn't what investigators expected. Instead of breaking down or confessing, he made a strange statement. "You don't understand. It wasn't supposed to happen that way. Only Marino was supposed to." The ground was more unstable than the research indicated. Sterling immediately recognized the significance of this statement. Teddy had just admitted to reading Helen's research before the trip, something he had previously denied. More importantly, he had revealed that Anthony Marino had been a specific target. Under renewed questioning, with the radar evidence before him, Teddy's story shifted again. He claimed that Marino had discovered him stealing from the expedition funds on the morning of July 15th. "He threatened to have me arrested," Teddy said. "He said he had connections, that he'd make sure I went to prison. I was just going to scare him, make him back off. But this version still didn't explain the elaborate planning, the altered permits, or why all 4 victims had died. Sterling pressed harder, using a technique of presenting hypothetical scenarios based on the evidence, allowing Teddy to correct her misunderstandings. "Let me theorize," Sterling said. "You studied Helen's research at your geological survey job. You learned about unstable thermal areas. When you heard about Dorothy's expedition hiring an assistant, you saw an opportunity. You applied for the job specifically because you knew Anthony Marino would be there with cash." Teddy remained silent, but his attorney was taking notes. Sterling continued. "You altered the permits early that morning to provide cover for being in a restricted area. You had scouted the location the day before, identifying exactly where the thermal crust was thinnest. You received pager messages from someone, probably someone you'd paid to monitor ranger positions, confirming when the area was clear. You led the group to that specific spot, knowing that the weight of 4 adults standing close together would cause the crust to collapse. But you stayed back, safe on solid ground, photographing them as they fell through. Then you staged your own injuries, soaked yourself in thermal runoff, and waited where you knew Kevin Rivers would find you on his evening patrol." Teddy's response was unexpected. "You're wrong about one thing," he said quietly. "I didn't pay anyone to watch the Rangers. I didn't need to." This statement opened a new line of investigation. If Teddy hadn't paid someone, then who had been sending the pager messages? Investigators returned to the payphone records and made a startling discovery. The phone used to send the clear message was located not in a public area, but in the park's administrative building, in an area restricted to employees. Cross-referencing employee schedules from July 15, 1992, investigators found that only 3 people had been in the administrative building at 3:14 p.m. 2 were accounted for in a meeting. The third was a seasonal employee named Marcus Stone, who had worked in park communications that summer. Tracking down Marcus Stone proved difficult. Employment records showed he had left Yellowstone at the end of the 1992 season and seemingly vanished. But deeper investigation revealed that Marcus Stone was an alias. His real name was Martin. Cross-referencing employee schedules from July 15, 1992, investigators found that only 3 people had been in the administrative building at 3:14 p.m. 2 were accounted for in a meeting. The third was a seasonal employee named Marcus Stone, who had worked in park communications that summer. Tracking down Marcus Stone proved difficult. Employment records showed he had left Yellowstone at the end of the 1992 season and seemingly vanished. But deeper investigation revealed that Marcus Stone was an alias. His real name was Martin Cross, Teddy's older brother. This revelation transformed the entire investigation. Martin, 5 years older than Teddy, had a significant criminal record that would have prevented him from getting a job at a national park. He had used fake identification to secure the seasonal position, specifically in the communications department, where he could monitor ranger radio traffic and movements. It was Martin's idea from the beginning, Teddy finally admitted, his resistance crumbling. "He knew I was in trouble with the gambling debts. He said he had a foolproof plan to get money. He'd been working at the park for 2 months, learning the routines, identifying wealthy tourists. When he heard about Marino's expedition and all that cash, he said it was perfect." The brothers had planned what they thought would be a simple robbery. Martin would monitor communications, ensuring no rangers were nearby. Teddy would lead the group to an isolated area, threaten them with the unstable ground, and force Marino to hand over the money. The thermal pool was meant to be a threat, not a weapon. But Marino fought back, Teddy continued, his voice hollow. He grabbed Helen's notebook, said it proved the ground was safe where we were standing. He was wrong. He didn't understand that Helen's data was from winter measurements. In summer, with the increased thermal activity, the safe zones shifted. When he stepped forward to confront me, the ground cracked. According to Teddy, the collapse had happened in seconds. Marino fell through first, his weight breaking the crust. Dorothy, standing closest to him, immediately went through as well. Richard had tried to grab her, and Helen had tried to grab him. The chain reaction pulled all four through the widening hole into the superheated water below. "I could have tried to help," Teddy admitted, tears finally coming after 32 years. But Martin was screaming in my ear through the pager to get out, to stick to the story we'd rehearsed. So I ran to the runoff stream, soaked myself like we'd planned, tore my jacket on a rock to make it look like a struggle, and went to where I knew Rivers would find me. The money had been in Marino's backpack, which had fallen on solid ground when he went through. Teddy had grabbed it before staging his injuries. Martin had left the park that very night, using his insider knowledge to avoid any investigation. The brothers had split the money, with Teddy using his share to pay off his debts and Martin disappearing with the rest. Detective Sterling asked the crucial question, "Where is Martin now?" Teddy's answer shocked everyone. "He died in 2003, cancer. He never spent any of the money, said it was cursed. On his deathbed, he made me promise never to tell, said it would only hurt the families more to know the truth." Investigators verified Martin's death certificate. He had indeed died of lung cancer in a Phoenix hospice in 2003, registered under his real name. His modest estate had included an envelope with $5,000 in old bills and a note, "For the families, if the truth ever comes out." The district attorney faced a complex legal situation. The statute of limitations had expired for robbery and most other charges. But there was no statute of limitations on murder, even if the deaths had resulted from a robbery gone wrong. The question was whether Teddy's actions constituted murder or manslaughter. Sarah Winters, now representing all the families, made a powerful statement at the preliminary hearing. "For 32 years, we believed our loved ones died in a tragic accident. We made peace with that. Learning it was a deliberate act, even one that went wrong, has reopened wounds we thought had healed. Teddy Cross didn't just take 4 lives that day. He stole 32 years of truth from us." The evidence was overwhelming. The recovered film showing Teddy with Helen's notebook before the incident, the altered permits in his handwriting, the pager messages from his brother, the pre-scouting of the location, the financial records showing his debts and their mysterious payment, and finally his own admission that he had led the victims to danger for money. In December 2024, Teddy Cross was charged with 4 counts of felony murder, a charge that applies when deaths occur during the commission of another felony, even if killing wasn't the intent. His attorney argued for manslaughter, claiming the deaths were an unforeseeable accident during a planned robbery. The prosecution countered that anyone who weaponizes Yellowstone's thermal features against tourists has committed an act so inherently dangerous that murder charges are appropriate. The trial was set for March 2025, but Teddy surprised everyone by accepting a plea deal in January. He pleaded guilty to 4 counts of second-degree murder in exchange for a sentence of 25 years to life, with the possibility of parole after 20 years. Given his age of 54, it was likely a life sentence. At his sentencing, Teddy made a final statement. "I've carried this guilt for 32 years. Every tourist season, I'd see families at Yellowstone trusting their guides, and I'd remember what I did. Dorothy Winters trusted me. They all trusted me. I betrayed that trust for money I couldn't even bring myself to fully spend. I know I can't bring them back, but maybe the truth finally coming out can give their families some closure." The judge, before passing sentence, made her own observation. "Mr. Cross, you speak of carrying guilt, but for 32 years you also carried your secret. You attended memorial services. You comforted grieving families. You let them believe their loved ones died because of their own misadventure. That's not guilt, Mr. Cross. That's cruelty compounded over decades." The discovery in Morning Glory Pool had one more revelation. Among the metallic objects detected by the radar was a small waterproof container that Anthony Marino had been carrying. Inside, preserved by the airtight seal, was a letter he had written to his wife the night before his death. In it, he expressed doubts about the trip, mentioning that the young assistant gives me an uneasy feeling and that he was considering cutting the expedition short. He ended with, "If anything happens, know that I love you and that this trip was supposed to be my way of contributing something beautiful to the world." The letter was delivered to Marino's widow, now 81 years old and living in a Chicago nursing home. Her daughter reported that she read it once, smiled sadly, and said, "I knew something was wrong. Anthony always had good instincts about people. I should have trusted that." The Yellowstone case prompted a review of other cold cases involving thermal features in national parks. Investigators found 3 similar incidents over the past 50 years, where individuals had disappeared near thermal features under suspicious circumstances. While most appeared to be genuine accidents, the Cross case demonstrated that the dangerous beauty of these natural wonders could be weaponized by those with knowledge and malicious intent. Park security measures were updated following the case. All permits for photography and research near thermal features now require GPS tracking devices. Background checks are mandatory for all guides and assistants. The park also installed more surveillance cameras in remote areas, though the vastness of Yellowstone means complete coverage remains impossible. Helen Frost's research, which Teddy had twisted for his criminal purposes, was posthumously published in a special edition with proceeds going to a safety foundation established in the victims' names. Her work has actually saved lives, helping park services better understand and mark dangerous thermal areas. It's a bitter irony that research meant to protect people was used to harm the very researcher who created it. Dorothy Winter's blog, Off the Beaten Path, was revived by her daughter Sarah as a memorial. Each entry now includes safety tips and warnings about trusting strangers in remote locations. The July 15th entry every year is dedicated to remembering Dorothy, Richard, Helen, and Anthony, along with the lesson their loss teaches: that sometimes the greatest dangers in nature come not from the environment, but from those who would exploit it. Richard O'Connor's photography, recovered from various shoots before the fatal trip, was compiled into the book Dorothy had envisioned. Published in 2024, Yellowstone Through Richard's Lens became a bestseller, with his widow Patricia finally seeing her husband's artistic vision recognized. The final photo in the book is the last clear image of the group, taken by the German tourists, showing 4 talented individuals hours before their lives were cut short. The Morning Glory Pool continues to draw thousands of visitors each year. Most don't know about the tragedy of 1992 or the secrets it held for 32 years. But park rangers now tell the story during safety briefings, using it as a powerful reminder that the park's thermal features are not just beautiful, but potentially deadly, and that human greed can be just as dangerous as any natural hazard. In a final twist, investigators discovered that Teddy had been planning another crime when he was arrested. Now running adventure tours in Montana, he had recently taken out large insurance policies on his business partners and had been researching remote locations with dangerous terrain. His computer contained searches for accidental death insurance payouts and how long before missing persons are declared dead. It seemed that 32 years of keeping a deadly secret had not reformed him, but had instead convinced him he could get away with it again. This discovery led to additional charges and ensured that Teddy Cross would never have the opportunity to betray anyone's trust again. The judge amended his sentence to life without the possibility of parole, stating, "Mr. Cross, you've demonstrated that you view human life as expendable when it stands between you and money. Society cannot risk giving you another chance." The case officially closed in February 2025, 32 years and 7 months after Dorothy Winters led her team into Yellowstone with dreams of creating something beautiful. The truth, when it finally emerged from the depths of a thermal pool, proved that sometimes nature doesn't kill. It merely hides the evidence of human evil. The Old Faithful geyser continues its reliable eruptions, a testament to nature's predictability. But the morning glory pool, with its deceptive beauty and hidden depths, serves as a reminder that some secrets can stay buried for decades, waiting for the right moment to surface. The families of the victims found different ways to process the truth. Sarah Winters channeled her anger into advocacy, working to improve safety regulations in national parks. Patricia O'Connor chose forgiveness, saying that holding on to hatred wouldn't bring Richard back. Helen Frost's colleagues established a scholarship in her name for geology students, ensuring her passion for science lives on. Anthony Marino's widow passed away just weeks after learning the truth, her daughter believing she had held on just long enough to know what really happened. As for Teddy Cross, he spends his days in Montana State Prison, where he works in the library. Guards report that he avoids books about nature or travel, and he has never once looked at materials about Yellowstone. Perhaps, finally, the weight of what he did has become too heavy to bear. Or perhaps he's simply angry that after 32 years of freedom bought with 4 lives, the truth finally caught up with him, emerging from the depths just as surely as the geysers of Yellowstone rise from the earth, inevitable and unstoppable. The story of the Old Faithful vanishing serves as a cautionary tale about trust, greed, and the patient nature of justice. Sometimes the earth itself becomes a witness, preserving evidence in its thermal embrace until the time is right for revelation. And sometimes the most faithful thing of all is not a geyser that erupts on schedule, but the persistence of those who seek the truth, no matter how many years it takes to surface.